Welcome back to True Print for Life. I'm your host, Christina Vera. And today I'm super excited to have a guest co-host with me today, Mr. Jeffrey Price Jr. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Jeff is a entrepreneur coach. He is soon to be an author in the coming weeks, which we'll get more into. But just excited to have you. Welcome to the podcast. I do want to give our listeners just a little bit of background as we dive deeper into the work that you're leading and ultimately some of your newer projects. So Jeffrey Price Jr. is a businessman. Say it for me.
Logistician.
Well, I've never heard that word in my life, but coach and consultant who equips leaders to be a catalyst for the transformation in the marketplace. Known as the Chief Encouragement Officer, he founded Kingdom Coaching Services. Kingdom Coaching Services is a global coaching consulting firm that inspires, teaches, mentors, and motivates. He advises executives, entrepreneurs, and leaders on how to unleash the lion within and how they can empower other leaders with that sphere of influence. Jeff is also the owner of Plan Logistics Solutions and is known as a visionary leader who has a proven track record of success. He graduated from the United States Army of Transportation as a distinguished graduate, scoring the unheard of 100% on every test. During his tenure in the United States Army Reserves as a transportation management coordinator, he was also deployed to Afghanistan and received numerous Army Achievement Medals for his hard work, courage, leadership, discipline, drive, and character. He lives in Columbus, Ohio with his beautiful wife, Alexandria, 3 children, Jaden, Juliana, and Jeffrey, and their loyal dog, Bella. His hobbies include reading, charity work, fitness, and attending his local church. So welcome, Mr. Jeffrey Price.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm introduction.
Yes. I was like, wow, that was some of those words were kind of big and I didn't know how to say them, but
definitely a mouthful.
Yeah. So this is amazing. I think you are obviously kind of in a few different areas of expertise. And so I guess just wanting to dive right into obviously transitioning from the military back into, what did it be? I believe it was corporate America. So talk to us a little bit about just your journey in terms of when you started working, did you know you were going to end up being an entrepreneur? How did you end up in this sphere of now you're running multiple companies?
Yeah. That's a great question. Where did it start? And I've noticed throughout my own life and interviewing other leaders and entrepreneurs that, life has a way of little breadcrumbs, so to speak, to where, it has for you or where you're supposed to go. Mm-hmm. So for me, once I got to the Army and I realized that I didn't, I was a slacker, to say the least, throughout most of my life, especially within my 20s. And for me to score 100% on every test in the Army, I realized that I was smart, that I was intelligent, that I did have the capability of something great inside of me. So when I scored 100% on that test, I knew from that moment that I should pursue a career in logistics. I had joined the Army with the intent of, hey, I'm gonna just get some debt paid off, get some work experience, because I never finished college. My degree would have been in organizational communications, but as some of you know, that degree only pays about $40,000 right out of college. I already started a family, and it didn't make sense to just jump right into the workforce with that income. So going through the Army, that helped really build my character, taught me the discipline, taught me about fitness. It really pushed me towards what was already inside of me. So fast forward, once I got back and transitioning into the workplace, I wanted to find something in logistics to where I can piggyback off that work experience. So that's where I ended up at Honda, doing automotive logistics, doing transportation there. Was there for about 5 years. And then when COVID hit, that's when I was like, you know what? I should really go back and start that business that was already in my heart. When I was in Afghanistan and doing transportation, I saw people who were contractors that had their own businesses or W-9, so to say, and they were making 7 times what I was making, but we were doing the exact same thing. So I was like, you know what? Now that I have this downtime with COVID, I'm working from home a little bit. Let me go back and start that business that was already inside of me. So that's when I started playing right in the middle of 2020. When everybody else got furloughed, I was still working. So I was like, you know what? If a multi-billion-dollar company can trust me with this level of responsibility, I'm being selfish and not giving this gift out to other companies that also need help in transportation logistics. So that's when Plan was formed right in the middle of COVID. And it's been an incredible journey ever since.
That's wonderful. And I think it's, I think sometimes for a lot of the people I talk to are in this space of just how to plan for that transition. And I think, one of the things I always say to people is like, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And I think that social media has put out this misconception that like, oh, you got to have multiple hustles. You got to be out here. You got to do this. You got to do that. Yeah. And it's like, actually you don't. Like if you're the type of person that you find a career that you're really like passionate about, and even if you're not passionate about, because my husband always reminds me, it's like, I don't know that I'm passionate about it, but it's something that I know I'm good at. It's something that I'm able to earn a living and take care of my family. Like he's at peace with that. And right. I think that it's really, truly important that, as you said, it was on your heart to want to own a business one day. But it's not something that is for everyone. So exactly. I think it's important that people understand that. But going back to your earlier point about just like, you were already, a family man and already in the process of, wanting to be an entrepreneur. And then obviously you chose to do it at such a very unpredictable time. Right. And so like, can you talk to us a little bit about like, what was that process like for you and your family? And like, obviously even in partnership, right? Like that's not a decision that you can just make, which some people just make it, but it's like, can you talk to us about like, what was that process like for you and knowing that like, I'm leaving something that's guaranteed that I'm able to pay my bills and take care of my family into a space during a time where nothing was guaranteed, even the ability to get essentials out of the grocery store. Like what was that process like for you all?
Yeah. And, I'm a little different in my thought process. So when I'm talking to leaders and entrepreneurs with that question is the best time to really get into an industry is when it's not stable. Because if you're trying to get new customers, get new business and everything is fine, willy-nilly, why would somebody bring on a new business? Why would they even create a new partnership? You almost need something bad to happen, not to, put something out there negative, but you need something like that for somebody to say, I'm willing to give you a chance. I'm willing to work with a new provider. So when I encourage people is, if you see that there's a space in the market where things aren't going right, that's the exact time you want to get into it, because when you get your name out there, they'll be more willing to give you a chance. So circling back to what you said about starting the business with the family, when I was looking at a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in my household where I'm really driven, my wife, she's more like, I say it's the engineering mindset, right? If it makes sense, why change it? Right. She's not big on like taking these risks. She's not as risk adverse as I am. Yeah. But I knew for the marriage to work and for the business to work, there had to be a buy-in for her to say yes. So I own 51% of it. She owns 49%. And that's really what got us to get on board. And she wasn't on board right away. She was like, man, you're crazy. She was like, for you to leave everything that's already solidified, everything's getting paid. I was already making six figures at Honda, and it wasn't like I was stagnant in my position. I was actually going up in the company, but I also realized that, not to say corporate America isn't for everybody, but for me, I knew I was never going to be fulfilled. There was always going to be something in my heart that says, there's more out there for you, Jeff. There's more out for you. And with me being in my 30s, especially early 30s at that time, 3-4 years ago, I didn't want to have a life of regret. I didn't want to sit back here 50, getting my retirement pen, being like, man, I really wish I would have started that company, because I would have felt like I shortchanged myself. And I don't want that legacy to be for myself or for my children. So when I first left, we went to marriage counseling. It was rough, but we ended up coming back together when she saw the fruit. She saw the persistence. She saw how things were just supernaturally working out in our favor. And then she finally bought in. And now, she's very encouraging about the business and the company.
And you talked about, and I think it's really important that you mentioned, I believe earlier on, it's just, you have to be able to have a discipline, right?
Yes.
Because I think as entrepreneurs, there's this thing like, oh, I'm motivated. Like motivation ain't every day. And I think one of the things that I have noticed, and I don't know this to be 100%, but based on what I've gathered about you, it's more than just like a motivation. Like you knew when you left your corporate job, right? Like, and any woman listening, we know how we are. Like, listen, we gonna give you some time before this either shakes or you going back to work. Yeah. And it's so funny because my husband is very similar to your wife in terms of, when I left my job and left, the traditional, corporate world or the nonprofit world in that time, for him, because he is an engineer and he's very, very practical, like, well, how's this going to work? How you going to make money? And so I think if he didn't see me getting up every single day trying to make it happen, and there were days that I didn't have it in me, like I was not motivated to go out here and talk to people about a business they couldn't even see, or about, why they should invest in me when there's 15 other people who they could possibly invest in. So can you talk a little bit about just like, as you were early on in this transition of knowing you were going to leave like your secure job into this space of entrepreneurship, what was that discipline process like for you, essentially, because it's also a mindset piece of it, right? You got to bet on you every single day to be able to go out and do something like this. So what was that process like for you and just preparing for, all right, how am I going to actually do this?
Yeah. So, I think the simplest definition of discipline is doing what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. Mm-hmm. So for me, the three big pillars that helped me with my discipline is, first, I focus on the facts. The fact is, if I make 100 phone calls, and it's almost a numbers game, 100 phone calls, I'm going to get one person that's going to at least give me an opportunity to share my testimony, share my story, share my services on how I can actually help them. Mm-hmm. So once I got the facts together, that helps with the discipline. If you're trying to lose weight, the fact is, if you eat different and you are putting in the work, you're going to get results. So whether I felt like it or not, I just looked at the facts. And then the secondly is the faith. Faith is simply what you believe in. So I really had a spiritual relationship with my connection to God. And that in turn helped me believe in myself, that I saw myself the way that he sees me. I didn't see myself as the college dropout, the drug addict, the binge drinker that I used to be. I saw myself as a leader, a professional, a family man, a man that had a bigger purpose in life. So the faith helped. And then after I got the facts and the faith, then I got my feelings together to where those days when I didn't feel like it, I could look back at the facts, I could look at my faith, and then that pushed my heart to be in the right posture to keep going through it. Because being an entrepreneur, as you mentioned, I get rejected all the time. I mean, you've been in business 10 years, I've been in business 4, and I still get thousands of no's every month. But one yes can change your life. Mm-hmm. And for those listening, one yes can really shape the whole trajectory of your life. One connection, one networking event, because all you need is one opportunity to share your story, share your voice. And at the end of the day, people invest in people. So if another person sees that you got it, you got that fire and you're willing to do it, they will invest in you.
Absolutely. And so what is kind of like, what was your process like? So for you, you mentioned making, 100 calls a day. Like, do you have like a set routine that you use in terms of, because you also are running like 2 businesses, right? Like you have Plan plus the Kingdom coaching services. Is there like a system that you've been able to kind of create around like how you're able to maintain and, grow 2 businesses?
Yeah. So when I first started, it was just myself and one other person. Him and I, we would get on Zoom calls together, my first employee, and we would just look at each other and we're like, we're just going to make these calls ourselves. And literally, we're just going back and forth off of a leads list that we had of companies that would buy our services. So let me go back a little bit. You want to look at people who are going to give you a favorable response. So me being a veteran, me having a service-disabled being a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, I knew I had favor reaching out to certain companies that had a supplier spin for those areas, right? Being a family-owned business. So now when I'm making my calls, I like to say you have to be selective to be effective. So even though I'm making 100 calls, I'm calling companies that are family-oriented. Maybe they're family-owned as well. They're military-friendly, and starting there. So making those calls with him side by side. That's how we got momentum to where we are now. Now I have a call center that I partner with to where they do all the cold calling. And then when I get warm leads, then my internal team follows up, because it is draining. You know, when you're making those calls and you're just getting started and you just had a whole week where everybody told you no, it can take a lot out of you. But having that encouragement, and especially in leadership, to where you can tell your team and they can see it, like, look, I have one customer that just spent $700,000 with me last year alone. Imagine if you had 5 of those, where would you be right now?
Right.
And when they can see it and see that it's real for me, then they can see that it can be real for them as well. So to answer your question in one word, collaboration, having the right partnerships and willing to invest in those relationships. And that's how you get a good output.
How many hours a day would you say you spend to just kind of like, you know, working your business or thinking about like gaps within your, like, what does your strategy process look like in evaluating? I guess it's essentially like scaling your business, right? Like, I think they're a big part of what, even as an entrepreneur this long, you know, I meet so many different entrepreneurs who have all different types of, you know, theories or, you know, routines, so to speak. And I'm finding the more and more like people that I meet that are what I deem successful, right? We all deem success in different ways. So I think it's really, really important for those of you who are listening to understand that success doesn't look one specific way for every single person. You know, I know you mentioned earlier, it seems that initially money was very much the motivation for you starting your business. So I think it boils back to, you really have to be able to understand, why do you want certain things? And certainly, you know, being able to be around and learn from other people who have achieved what you want to achieve. You know, for me, it's not about money per se. Like, I want to make money. I am making money, you know, and being able to have, you know, financial sustainability is critical. But for me, it's always been about my time, you know, being able to have time with my family, being able to, you know, if I need a pause, you know, if my daughter is sick in the hospital for 2 months, I could sit there with her and there is nobody calling me. Now, there's sacrifice that comes along with that. And I think that's part of, you know, that discipline piece you mentioned earlier. Yes, I could go work in a corporation right now, God willing, and, you know, make a lot more money and probably have less stress. But for me, it's about the priorities in my life, which I have figured out what they are. So I want to be able to create a lifestyle around that. And I think because my husband now is so supportive, like financially anchored us and allowed me to be able to like figure this out as I'm going. But I think it's really, really critically important to understand, like, you know, there's still a day-to-day, like, as to how this looks and how you can kind of lean into, you know, those routines or disciplines on days that you're like, maybe this ain't for me. Like, it's not working out. I keep getting the no's. I'm not getting the yeses. Like, can you speak a little bit to just like, how do you really, you know, collaboration you mentioned, but like, what does that look like on a day-to-day for you?
Yeah. And you said a lot. So those priorities, right? Like, so having the freedom to pick my daughter up from school every day. You know, my oldest daughter lives in Maryland. To be able to travel to see her monthly, that to me is worth way more than the money. You know, creating those relationships is really what's most important. The money just comes, right? It comes from just being honest, doing business the right way. So it's like, once I stopped chasing money, the money started chasing me, you know, where deals just started to just fall into place. But as far as my morning routine, just with me being a man of the faith, as soon as I wake up, you know, I start off with prayer and I write out my dreams. You know, I'm really big that God speaks through dreams. I've closed business deals through dreams of people I've dreamed about, things of that nature. So as soon as I wake up in the morning, I'm writing out whatever dream that I had last night to the best of my ability. Then I'm in prayer, I'm reading the Bible. Then after that, I'm going straight to the gym. I work out, come back home after I'm finished working out. I make my wife and my son breakfast, get them started throughout their day. Then I have my first team meeting. So I'm up between 4 and 5 in the morning.
I keep hearing that 4 a.m. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can do it. Because so many successful people who I deem as successful, like, I literally just had a conversation with a senator like a couple of weeks ago, and we were out there talking because we had to stand outside. It was like 6:30 in the morning, and I had this meeting at 6:30 in the morning. And I said, man, it's early. He's like, this is early for you? And I was like, well, to be outside already talking to people. Yeah. He's like, my day starts at 4 a.m. I said, what is it with everybody at 4 a.m.? Like, why? I'm starting to see the pattern though, because it seems like everybody gets up at 4. I don't know what y'all do between 4 and 6, but it just seems so early to me. So where does the 4 come in? Is it just I would love to know, like, why do you get up at 4 a.m.?
It got drilled in me from the military.
Okay, so it was a discipline for you.
So it was a discipline, and it just rolled over.
Can't get up that early.
So after, when I started reflecting on my life, and I was like, man, I was really, really successful in the military. Army Achievement Awards. I was in the best shape of my life, fighting for our country in Afghanistan. I realized the secret sauce really is into getting up early. And then by the time when people are just yawning, I'm already charged. Like, I'm having my team meeting. I'm like pumped up, like, yeah, let's go. We're going to do this today. And they're just like wiping the crust out their eyes. Like, Jeff, I'm just getting up, man. Like,
listen, I get up at like 6:30. I'm just like, man, I got to get up at 4. I'm really going to try this because I keep hearing 4 a.m. and I'm like, it's just so early. So that 4 a.m., you wake up, you pray, you meditate, you write your dreams. So you spend that whole first hour, it sounds like, just with yourself.
Yes. And for people who are trying to get to that point, it didn't happen with me overnight, right? Okay. I got out the military. I was extremely undisciplined in my life, then had a come to Jesus moment in 2020. So in between that part, how I started getting up that early is just starting in little increments. So don't jump from like 6 to 4, start from 6 to 6:15.
Okay.
Do that for about a week, 2 weeks. Then go from 6:15 to 6. Then go backwards in like 15-minute increments.
That's a good idea.
And then before you know it, then you'll be at 4 o'clock and you won't feel drained and you won't be too hard on yourself, because to immediately cut 2 hours of sleep cold turkey, that's like extremely hard to do. But working in 15-minute increments backwards, that's how I got there.
And so then you go to bed early?
I try to go to bed when my son goes to bed. He's about to be 2 in December. Mm-hmm. So I try to be in bed by 9.
All right, so 4 a.m. seems to be a key ingredient to every person I talk to who is on the path to success. And so with that being said, you obviously, have navigated running 2 companies during a pandemic, during a transition in your family. You had another child, and, now you're also in this space. You have a project coming out.
Yes.
So can you talk to us a little bit about your newest adventure?
Yep. So earlier this year, I had a reflective moment. Just like you, I'm in all these networking groups in Columbus through the Columbus Chamber of Commerce, the Conway Family Business Center. So I'm looking back and I'm asked, you scaled a company, Plan Logistics Solutions, to 7 figures in less than 3 years. Most people are chasing the 6 and you hit the 7. So how did you get to 7 figures in less than 3 years? And I write in the book that journey of when I first started, literally my Fab 5, my super team that I thought that would be like stick with me, it didn't work out. Mm-hmm. Not to any fault of their own,
right?
But it's just with COVID, leaving job security to be at a true startup. You started up multiple companies. Mm-hmm. There's a sacrifice there.
Right.
And people think that, that they like to romanticize entrepreneurship, especially here in the United States. Like, oh, I'm going to just start. It's going to be quick money. Look, when I started my company, I lost about $150,000. I took a home equity line of credit out, used my whole 401k to fund the business. So I was in the red over 6 figures to start the company. But, over time, we got the money back. Things just worked out supernaturally, selling the house, getting rid of that HELOC, and then just making money organically through the company. Mm-hmm. But that journey of starting the company is what the book is called, The Ins and Outs of Leadership. Mm-hmm. It's a guide to maximize your return on investment in the workplace. And with the ins, I put EN versus IN, because I found doing that case study on my own company to where those 5 didn't work out, to where the next 5 that I brought in, they quit their jobs. They just started straight from the ground up, to where I share in the story, Joseph, the first one that came along that stuck with me, I told him about the company, where I was going with it. He had a job doing something else in trucking and transportation. And before I could even tell him even more detail, he was like, I want to do it with you. I'm about to quit my job in July because I know you need to hire people. And I'm like, you want to quit your job? I was like, I was just going to ask you to help me with it. I didn't expect you to quit your job because he's engaged. He has 2 kids. But he was like, you know what? I really believe in you and where this is going. So I'm like, what did I do right this time versus last time? So I found that step 1 is in engagement. So that's the first EN, is that we had a real relationship built. The first 5, I had a relationship with them, but I kind of took our relationship for granted. And sometimes when people agree with you and they say, yes, I want to work with you, you kind of stop investing in them, to where with him, it was just built up over time, over the years, because he was in the Army with me.
Okay.
So that's where the book started. Then it goes from engagement to enlightenment to encouragement to entrust. Then you enable, and that's the permission to be great. And if you follow the methodology in that order, the return on investment is, I found that people actually enjoy their jobs. They're enthusiastic about their work. They feel enamored. So that means they love not just what they're doing, but who they're doing it with. They feel enriched, and finally they've been able to endure. So where now I've been in business almost 4 years, I have minimal turnover in my company.
That's wonderful. So the book is coming out in a few short weeks, actually. And so why do you feel like, why the book? Like, why now? Why do you feel like this is a tool that people need to have?
I found that starting my company right in the middle of COVID, and when I was still at Honda, I found that people came back to work as a shell of themselves. They weren't themselves anymore. People had a lot of losses financially, personally. There was a lot of disgrunt, so to speak, between people who had to work, people who were like furloughed and were still getting paid, not working.
Right.
So there was a lot of animosity in the workplace.
Yeah.
So with even rumors of COVID coming back around and things of that nature, it felt like it was the perfect time to release the book. Because as a leader, if you want to change your organizational culture, it starts with you. It comes from the top down. So if you're a leader and you own your own business and you're wondering why nobody wants to work with me, why I keep having turnover, you got to look at the man in the mirror and say, it's probably because of something I'm doing, and taking accountability and responsibility for that.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned early on, that it was a journey for you, and it was interesting. I think I heard TD Jakes, had to be TD Jakes not too long ago. He said sometimes the hard part about, people you met while you were on your journey is hard to stay connected in a way, because they continue to see you in that light.
Yes.
Like they don't see the growth that you had. It's like, oh, I remember when, and so, for you in this journey of now, entrepreneurship, also self-awareness, as you mentioned, your team has to be able to see you in a certain light. That's not something you just woke up and suddenly had. Like that has been a continual journey that we're all on. And so for you, like that self-awareness piece, like how long did it take you to really start to understand that it does start with you?
It took me really about a year in 2020. That's when I really started taking accountability for my actions, the way that I treated people throughout my family, the way I treated my kids' mothers. It was just a lot that I realized that the reason why there was a lot of toxicity, I might have butchered that, in our relationships was because of me. It wasn't because of them. It was because of what I did. And the impact was because of me. I couldn't point the fingers anymore. I had to take ownership. And because I have taken ownership, all of my relationships have improved.
Yeah. And so would you say that, if you could go back in your younger self, right, as part of, just thinking about the life that, God willing, you have been able to create, the lessons you have learned, just thinking back, what would you have told younger Jeff, like 12-year-old Jeff, who, maybe was like, I don't know what I want. I don't know what's next. With everything you've gone through and experienced, what would you tell your younger self?
I would have told my younger self to be myself. Growing up, especially in puberty, those years, I always wore a mask. Like deep down inside, I was always this God-fearing man who loved family, who always had a pure heart. But because in the inner city where I grew up, that was frowned upon. I was considered, you'd be like soft, so to speak. So I always put on a mask of being this hardcore guy. And with that mask, I really took on that personality and that persona to where, back then I was doing drugs all the time, drinking all the time, lusting after women. If you looked at me then, you wouldn't even think that like, wow, that came into this. But if I would have just been myself at that moment and just embraced that it's okay to be a good person. It's okay to want to go to church and to love people and not use or manipulate people as the world says to get ahead. I would have saved myself a whole lot of hardships and hardships on the lives of others. So one word, I would have just been myself from the jump and not try to conform myself into what the world thought success looked like or what being a man looked like.
Wow. I really, really appreciate you sharing that, because I think oftentimes, you know, even as women, we are just trying to figure men out. You know, like men try to figure women out, but we as women are often trying to figure out men. And I think, you know, you mentioned what the world wants you all to be. And, you know, there's a lot of internalizing that women go through, especially as a mother of a son. I understand men a lot more than I ever had, because there are mannerisms that I see in my son that I'm like, I know I'm not raising him like that. And sometimes it pisses me off, because I'm so like, I try to be so like, you always know your children get different versions of you. And I tell my listeners have heard me say this in years past. It's like, you know, I have 3 children, and you know, that oldest boy, like, this is why the oldest people are like, you see on TikTok and they're like, your firstborn child is because you did a lot of things probably wrong with that first child. And they were the experiment, you know, because you just didn't know what you were doing. You didn't know. And you were just, you know, for many of us, we were just trying to do the best that we could. And oftentimes there's not a self-awareness at that point. And then you get the middle one and you're a little bit better, God willing. You're figuring it out. You're getting your footwork.
Yep.
But then if you decide to have more, and, you know, that third or that last or whatever sequence that is for you, you just have a whole different, hopefully, mindset around your job as a parent.
Yes.
And so I have, you know, I feel like I have had very different experiences as well. All 3 of my kids, they definitely represent 3 different seasons in my life. So they have all had different versions of me as a mother. Yes. And I think with now being a boy mom of now 10-year-old son, I'm just like, wow, like I'm constantly having to go back and reprogram him on things that I never even told him he had to be.
Right.
And so I think that sometimes is such a hard thing if you don't know why, you know, men feel that they have to do or to hide certain emotions or hide certain, you know, attributes. It's just like, I don't know where that comes from, but it does make it hard to be able to have authentic relationships, and whether it be platonic or just like, you know, work related, because it's just like, we're just programmed so differently, where women are constantly portrayed as like super emotional or super, you know, either we're super emotional or, you know, quite frankly, we're called bitches because we're, oh, she's got an attitude, or she's, you know, she's this, she's that. And it's like, but if I were a man, you would associate that as a strong leader.
Exactly.
And so society continues to put all these gender biases around, you know, as a man, how you're supposed to act, and as a woman, how I'm supposed to act. And even in my space now, as an elected official, I go into rooms and I deal with folks who I notice they talk to me a certain type of way that I don't believe they would talk to a male colleague a certain type of way. And so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but just, you know, as you described it earlier on, you felt like you had to wear a mask for so long because there was this box that you were supposed to fit in.
Right. Yeah, I just felt like the pressure of being a man. And, you know, I had men in my family that, like, if I brought a girl over, they're sliding me condoms like, oh, I know you hitting that, right? So it's like, it's generational things that with men that's like, why are you encouraging me to have sex before marriage? Like, and now that I have a son, I'm going to tell him, like, I hope he's a virgin until he's married. I will hope the same thing for my daughters as well. Like, because I see the consequences that come along with that. You know, so it's little things that I think are generationally entwined. But for us being like the next generation of leaders, being a voice and telling that young man, to where I do a lot of ministry with at-risk youth, especially men, to let them know, like, hey, I'm a bigger guy. I went to the Army. I grew up in the hood. Like, I can relate to them, but I'm also going to tell you, don't go that way. Yeah. Because I know what the consequences are. I've dealt with that. And I don't want you to play your hand. Like I had a good hand in life to where my parents set me up, my grandparents set me up. I made my own life hard because of the choices that I made.
Yeah.
So I don't want people, regardless of where you're starting from in life, to make your life harder with wrong decisions. And as far as women goes, I'm in trucking and transportation primarily for Plan Logistics Solutions. And with that being such a male-dominated industry, women often don't have a voice. So I even write in the book to where I champion women, you know, because they do treat them different.
Yeah.
A trucker will talk to a woman dispatcher in my company, cuss her out, give her just be very disrespectful. And it's a culture thing because in trucking, there's no, to get in, the border of entry, so to speak, is very minimal. It doesn't matter your education, doesn't matter your criminal record, nothing. So you get an interesting group of people. And in their culture, say if they're from India or a country like that, they don't view women the same, or if they're in the Middle East, for example. So when they talk to women, they treat them differently. So what I try to do is just be a champion for them, you know, let them know, like, you can't talk to her that way because they wouldn't talk to me that way.
Right.
So there needs to be that common ground. And if you are a man, you need to really champion your sisters because that opens the door for them. And some of the greatest ideas have come from women. So I'm just big on championing women in the marketplace.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yes.
Yeah.
Champion women.
Yes.
You heard it here on True Crime for Life. Champion women. Absolutely. Well, Jeffrey, I appreciate you coming on today. I feel like we're probably going to have you back after the book is out because I would love to hear just kind of, you know, how the book is doing, and certainly wish you all the success in the businesses and the things that you have coming up, because I think it's super important for people to understand that not one set journey is everybody's journey. Yes. And, you know, certainly you can make changes in your life, no matter what age. It doesn't matter when it happens, how it happens. But, you know, if it's something you want, you have to be willing to put in the work to make it happen.
Yes, absolutely.
So as we close today, we often have a mantra here at True Print for Life, as we always like to close every one of our episodes. It's bigger than you.
Thank you so much for listening today. We're excited and we hope that you follow us on
Instagram, True Print for Life, YouTube channel, also True Print for Life. And make sure that you share, like, watch our videos. Make sure that you follow us on all streaming platforms.